All right, folks, so we are recording. So this is just a reminder that, your faces will be, and any voice that you say will be on the recording. So just want to make sure. Oh, we got somebody from Ukraine. Oh, how fantastic. So I don't know if I'm going to say your name right. Yelena Koshman. Hello, how fantastic to have you. And hopefully you might be able to shed some good info. I know a couple other folks from the region might be joining. And actually, listen, I'll just say this is going to be a fairly informal thing. SJ is a friend of mine and we're colleagues, and I picked up the phone to speak with him not long ago just to catch up about life, and was talking about, he's living in that region. So, and we'll let SJ introduce himself in just a moment, but SJ is living in that region and had an opportunity to kind of tell me a little bit about, what was going on. I had not heard anything about tensions that were going on in that area. Because I think the day that we talked, SJ, was the day that Biden said he was worried about what the troops on the border of Ukraine meant. So, you were plugged in with that. And then
Connie's on this call.
I'm sorry? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute that person. Yeah, and then that night I had dinner with a friend who brought up the same material. So I was quite interested in taking a look at the astrology that was connected to this, and forwarded it on to SJ, and then turns out SJ's been doing his own research. So then it was, hey, what if we just open up a conversation? First time that SJ and I have collabed like this, so we'll just have to keep it informal because we don't really know how it's going to flow. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Wade. I've been an astrologer for a few years now. And oh, Barris is here. Oh, that's so wonderful. Hi, Barris. Don't know if your audio is, you might not even be able to hear that, but hello. Right, what was I going to say? Sorry, I'm distracted by letting people into the room. So we're just here. Yes, it is snowing in New York City, so there's about a good, foot and a half of snow outside my front door. So it's nice to be cozied up and kind of talking about world politics. The truth is that I am not even remotely an expert on the regional politics that are involved. So I'm very grateful to have SJ here because he's a little bit more informed, and I'm also very excited to have folks who are joining from the region. I can see in the chat that we have people coming in. But what I have found is there's very, very little you can't learn if you've got enough time in the YouTube, access to YouTube. So I've been catching up with a little bit. But SJ, I don't know if you want to just say hey, introduce yourself quickly, or.
Yeah, thank you, Wade. Thanks for having me here. Welcome, everyone. Really great to see you. Yeah, my name is S.J. Anderson, an astrologer, Texan astrologer, currently living in the Balkans. So I'm not quite in the hot zone, and I don't really feel like where I am is really kind of in that hot zone, though it is a little bit closer than America or Texas. And I just want to say, yeah, I'm not an expert either on the region, but I'm certainly someone who tries to stay informed, just politically, geopolitically. As an astrologer, a part of our role, especially as a mundane astrologer, is to kind of stay abreast of things. And so I'm kind of coming to it from that perspective. And of course, we're dealing with heavy hitting global events, so it kind of affects everyone in the world. And so it's not that, I think we're all kind of trying to grapple with this together. And just a little bit more of the background, when Wade and I talked, this was thrust upon the global consciousness, and shortly before we talked. And I think that's part of also why we decided to do this, because it's a very important thing as superpowers kind of saber rattling. It affects us all. So that's why I think I felt an imperative to speak to this. And when Wade asked me to do it, I was very grateful. So thank you again, Wade, and welcome everybody here.
Yeah, excited to have you. And we talked a little bit too, SJ, about the importance of remembering that in these conversations, the threat of war and the reality of war, the astrology of those things, they look almost identical. There's so many opportunities for war to strike up, but whether or not we take our freedom of will to act upon that is a different discussion altogether. So I just want to say that while we're talking about what I think are some, if you knew to look for it, you would have been able to pinpoint these periods. And I think there's a couple more periods that we might be able to pinpoint that it's clear that this is going to be, a point of conversation from the astrology. It's easy to say that in retrospect, but I think when we show you the astrology, SJ's done some really great work that he's going to show about previous standstills and issues that have gone on internationally that involve Russia and some powers within the region. And then we'll walk through some of the charts that I pulled together. So I guess we can just, start. I'm going to give I think a very high overview of like pressing issue that's coming together. And I am going to say that, if you have things to add being in the region, feel free to add them. You're free to unmute yourself. You're free to, let us know if you're going to unmute yourself so that, so that I don't mute you thinking it's a mistake. But, you're free to weigh in. I mean, this is just kind of an open discussion and kind of a Q&A about the astrology, and certain things that SJ and I have been looking at and seeing. I know that what I'm going to be delivering is a very, it's a very reductive view. It's for a conversation like this, we do kind of have to take the highlights and reduce it down to something very simple so we can at least have the same discussion points. But if you listening to this are feeling like something really important, like game-changing important is missing from the conversation, chat box is yours. And I think we speak for both of us in saying, we're hoping to, hear those kind of observations if they arise. So I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the background because, there's been some recent, kind of tensions rising, but this is not a new issue. Tensions in the area have been around for a long time. This particular conversation that's happening right now, it has a pretty deep anchor into something that happened back in 1990. So if you can cast your minds back to, I can't, I was 2, but I was watching on YouTube. And so I pieced a little bit of this together. But, the thing is that we were experiencing at that time a massive collapse of communist governments that were between Russia and the Allied West. And right around the late 80s and early 90s, there were talks about the reunification of East and West Germany. And in this conversation, the stance that Gorbachev took essentially was that we did not want to see NATO and its powers continue to extend eastward. And in a series of talks moving toward reunification efforts and strategies and different ways that the conversations could go forward with all of the key stakeholders, there was this discussion that happened. I actually found a timestamp, SJ. I don't know if I told you this, but I found a timestamp and I found a document from the Department of State, which says the time this conversation took place. So this conversation took place February 9th, 1990 at 9 a.m. In Moscow. So I'm going to ask somebody to do me a favor. I need somebody to remember 20 degrees of Pisces. The reason I'm asking, who's going to do that from Francis? Can you remember 20 degrees Pisces for me? See, don't worry, we got more degrees, so I'll come back for you. But Francis, 20 degrees of Pisces was the ascending degree at the time that this talk commenced. Okay, so this is between Secretary of State Baker and I will just go ahead and show this document. Secretary of State Baker and the Soviet Foreign Minister, I'm not going to say this right, Shevardnadze, something along these lines. So this is what the document tells us. Although heavily redacted compared to the Soviet accounts of these conversations, the official State Department version of Secretary Baker's assurances to Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze just before the formal meeting with Gorbachev. So this was a second discussion that happened minutes before, like it was the hour, this discussion was the hour before the conversation moved into a more formal conversation with Gorbachev, which happened immediately preceding this meeting. And it contains a series of telling phrases. Baker proposes the 2+4 formula, with the 2 being the Germany and the 4, oh, we're getting some feedback, thank you, okay. The 2+4 formula with the 2 being the Germanys and the 4 the post-war occupying powers, and it argues against other ways to negotiate unification. It makes the case for anchoring Germany in NATO. Furthermore, Baker tells the Soviet foreign minister, and this is the important part, a neutral Germany would undoubtedly acquire its own independent nuclear capability. There were just some questions about whether or not Germany, you have to think about the tensions that were held in Germany at the time. Berlin Wall coming down, we're talking the reunification of this area of the world. So it's very tense. You know, there's a lot of heatedness, and very easy to imagine that, you know, a step in any wrong direction could be very problematic. So the question was whether or not Germany should be left to its own devices. Should it be brought in within NATO? What should we do? How do we temper the heat that is, you know, kicking off in Germany from all sides? So a neutral Germany, and Germany was a big, you know, that was a big loss for Russia, because Germany, you know, it anchored on the West, you know, East Germany did, anchored on the West, this kind of iron curtain that, you know, divided through these communist nations, and Russia one by one was starting to see these fall, and now Germany's starting to unify. So this is why Russia's got such a huge stake in what's going on with Germany. So a neutral Germany, which is what Baker told the Soviet foreign minister, would undoubtedly acquire its own independent nuclear capability, and that was seen as a big problem. This is exactly the kind of situation we want to avoid. Germany's been a bit of a problem for the last couple of decades. For the last century, it's been a major player in a lot of belligerences around the world. So it makes sense that there was a little bit of tension around the idea of Germany being able to have its own nuclear capability independent of oversight. However, a Germany that's firmly anchored in a changed NATO, and by that I mean a NATO that's far less of a military organization and much more of a political one, which is an interesting thing to say. Now we're talking already, I mean, you can get already this conversation about what NATO's role has been and what it should be. This is expert statecraft to say less of a military organization and more of a political one. It means absolutely nothing, because as soon as you are trying to exert political pressure and political force, how do you do that if you do not have, you know, economic levers? Military is where this comes in, an armed force. So it's very cleverly worded to hint that the aspiration is to be less for a form of conventional war, and instead moving toward a form of economic or political coercion. So it says nothing really, but that was what was said. However, a Germany that's firmly anchored in a changed NATO, and by that I mean a NATO which is far less of a military organization, more of a political one, would have no need for independent capability. And there would, of course, have to be ironclad agreements and guarantees that NATO's jurisdiction of forces would not move eastward. And this would have to be done in a manner that would satisfy Germany's neighbors to the east. Oh boy, I think that I have accidentally deleted a very important slide. So I'm gonna step out of this in just a moment and ask you guys to give me a second. How did I do that? Well,
Just going to come in and say quickly, I've changed the settings so no one can unmute. We'll change that back once it's time for Q&A so that you can unmute, just so there's no accidental unmuting. And then we would have to then mute you. So just know that we're not trying to silence or anything, but just to get the presentations, you know, get through these presentations.
That's super helpful. So I'm just going to very quickly, I was able to get my images back. So let me just resize them and then share. So remember where we left this conversation. Thank you, SJ, for helping monitor that. So where we left this conversation was the promise by Naker to Gorbachev's office that there was an intention not to allow NATO, and actually the word was guarantees, you know, that there would need to be guarantees in place. But again, this is that whole deal with statescraft. They, you know, saying that there need to be guarantees in place is very different from ensuring that there are. Right, can you see my slide? All right, so I have borrowed these images. From a couple different sites. So we've got the AP sent some, and then we've got one from the BBC. So let me get my animation or my annotation controls. Right. There we go. Okay. So if you look, I mean, we're talking east, this is Germany here for those who are maybe not as good with maps. And when you've got Germany split, you can start to see that on one side, on the eastern side, is where we would have said the USSR, the Soviets, or, you know, essentially a circle and influence of control. What we're talking about, political influence, economic influence, did I say political influence? If not, I did mean to. But you can see that, that promise was made in 1990, and then later that year, Germany was reunified, and it was done so when the moon was at 18 degrees Pisces. So Francis, there's the moon, right? Okay, right on the ascendant at the time that this conversation is happening. So you can see that there have actually been 14 countries that have acceded into NATO since this guarantee was set in place. Okay, or the handshake. And here's the list of countries. You can see Crimea has annexed itself, or sorry, been annexed into Russia. I think that happened in 2014, if I remember correctly. So Ukraine's right in this hot spot here. So, because just looking at it from a position on the map, you kind of do get the sense that, they're really caught in between, a very tense kind of position. And now what's essentially happening is we are hearing from Putin's office this frustration that the US didn't keep its promise. NATO didn't keep its promise. You expanded eastward. Well, it was maybe, a silly promise to say, because, it's the country's rights to decide for themselves where they go, or at least it ought to be. And so for, the Secretary of State in the US to, say something so definitively while also saying nothing, it was really just kind of deferring the problem to another day. So we are here for the update of this problem. You can see this is borrowed from the AP. Thank you for this image. This is where we are starting to see the buildup near the Ukraine border of military troops from Russia. So last I saw, the number was around 106,000. And last I knew, this morning, is that there's been varying jockeyings about whether or not the US is going to send military troops in. Biden has just said this morning that he is comfortable sending in troops. We have also heard that, Russia is not happy that the US has not made any concessions about, relinquishing any kind of control in the region. And so it's not hopeful, but it's, staying present for the negotiation talks. And it's I think that's kind of where we are right now. I mean, there's obviously in Europe a great deal of tension, and leaders who are organizing around what to do in terms of the gas crisis. My understanding of this is very shaky, but I think Russia owns pipelines that, fuel a great deal of Europe. Germany is particularly vulnerable. So at any rate, this is kind of where we're at the moment. I want to walk you through the astrology at the time that this promise was made, this Baker promise was made, and we're going to move into the astrology that's connected in elsewhere. So, I mean, you guys can tell me, what strikes out to you about this chart? I think what's crazy, do you see how many planets we have in the Western angle? I mean, you almost get kind of this, yes, and there's been this acknowledgement that there's a very strong Capricorn focus. There's a strong Saturn ruled focus, I think is how I would rephrase it, because if we say it like that, then we recognize that's exactly what we've got going on right now. We've got a huge pile up of planets in Capricorn and in Aquarius. So we're seeing cycles of return back to this chart. I think I also want to say that this chart is not for the time that discussion took place, because that chart has 20 Pisces on the ascendant. This is the chart for the eclipse that was occurring at the moment that the discussion was happening. And so these degrees are quite critical. I want to talk about the fact that when we centered this on DC, when Baker had made this discussion, and also this is the quote unquote home for NATO. We'll get into that in a little bit. I mean, NATO wasn't enforced until a signature happened in DC. So there's something about that, the US involvement that seems very, very important. But at any rate, when you take a look at this chart, what we see are all these planets that are kind of de-escalating tensions, or that's the intention, is to de-escalate tensions. We've got all these planets in the Western hemisphere that are setting, they are cooling, they're becoming more nighttime. But interestingly, we have this really nasty opposition that's happening between Jupiter and the 12th and all these planets in Capricorn right over here in the corner. And these are all, I would call, 7th house planets. All of these are 7th house planets. They're within 3 degrees of the 7th house cusp. And so while they're drawn in the 6th, it's largely just because of the how crowded that sign is. I want to point out where Mercury was at the time. So, what's the relevance of this? Pluto's about to transit that Mercury. Where's Mercury right this moment? Mercury is retrograding over this degree right now. I also want to kind of point out that when we talk about deals, promises, agreements, Mercury is somebody that we need to pay attention to, but also the moon. The moon was really the original messenger, and the one who makes communications, informed agreements, etc. This is a very lunar principle. The moon is right on the third house cusp and the sun is on the ninth. This is an eclipse that's happening. I mean, it is kind of talking about agreements, things that are spoken perhaps a little bit too quickly, or without due consideration for how this problem will appear in the future. I want also for us to pay attention to what's going on with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So at the time that this conversation happened, Mars and Uranus were conjunct exactly at 7 degrees Capricorn. They're only 8 minutes apart, so they look like they're in different degrees, but baby, they are on top of each other. So I'm going to ask somebody to pay attention to us for 7 or 8 degrees of Capricorn. So C, can you do that for us? Okay, so we're going to have more conversations about, Mars and Capricorn. I know that SJ has prepared something, I think, kind of exciting to talk about with this theme with Mars and Capricorn. But this particular degree with Mars is a very sensitive one. It is a sensitive one whenever we have big events that transit this degree for reasons that I will explain in just a couple of slides. So where is Mars now? I don't know if y'all realize, but Mars is actually building up to a return to this degree as we speak. Mars is currently at 3 degrees of Capricorn. At the time that we started our discussion today, the moon was at 4 Capricorn, and Jupiter at 6 Pisces. So, SJ and I were kind of thinking this is such a great signature for the conversation today because of the importance of the sign Capricorn and the early degrees of that sign. And, Jupiter's sextile into those degrees, it is keeping things cool for quite a while. If we didn't have that sextile from Jupiter, it might have kind of devolved much faster than it has so far. All right, so I don't have anything else that I want to say about this chart. I mean, obviously there's a Pluto square in here. We've got Neptune on the descent. I mean, take as much time as you need with this to know that oops is part of the signature, but it is in the spirit of de-escalation. I mean, it's important also. Is there somebody else here who can remember something for us? I just would like somebody who'd be willing to remember for us that pretty much every planet is in the Western Hemisphere descending over the descendant in this chart. So for the Baker promise, if somebody's willing to just remember that for us, all planets descending 7th cusp. There you go. The only exceptions are the moon and Jupiter. All right, so let's just move forward then and talk about, well, why did, what the heck happened over the last couple of weeks to cause this to really, pop up. The truth is that this is not a new thing. And I think that we need to hear the Ukrainian and local folks loud and clear when they say that this has been an ongoing tension for them for a very long time. Russia has been a threat for a long time. And it's not that it's background noise, but it's not necessarily helpful for the West to come in and fearmonger. It escalates things, makes everybody more nervous. And as a result, it's harder for us to kind of negotiate to hopefully something that can be, I don't know, fixed. It's a little naive for me to even say that. But this is the lunation that fell over NATO at the time. So in this window is when international recognition of the potential of conflict began. Biden, a few days after this, went and in a press release, yes, exactly, Karen, in a press release said that he was fairly sure that Putin had plans to invade Ukraine. And that set of a very different tone around the world about how we're talking about this. But I don't know if you guys see it, but do you see the drama of this moon, sun, Pluto opposition across the 10th and 4th house cusps? I mean, it's unavoidable. What we're seeing over and over again with Pluto and Capricorn is the kicking up of the dust of things that, we didn't handle right. We left unresolved. We left for somebody else to solve another time. We just tried to scrape by. It's the underbelly, the nasty side, of statecraft, as opposed to Pluto and Aquarius, which may be a lot less about systems of the past and more about how the current systems leave dark echo chambers into the future. Like it's like pits that we will walk into and don't realize until, we're 20 feet into the symbolic ground. So this Pluto, we're getting a lot of things kicked up around this time. We're getting the Epstein stuff, the Me Too movement, talking about racial justice internationally. We're talking about economic and environmental racism internationally. These conversations are absolutely not even remotely where they need to be, but we are starting to see through the advancement of things like social media, important voices coming forward on these topics. This is a little different. I mean, all of this is kind of caught between political pressures, battling it out with each other, and our ability to weigh in. It largely, it takes a lot of attention, because I don't know, for the Americans in the room, I mean, we really weren't taught terribly well about this period in history, about the geography. We were just taught that America did good, and that's all we really needed to know. And you move forward. So I think it's interesting just to keep moving through. We've got the moon opposition, Pluto and sun right on the 4th house cusp. This is a Mars return for Putin if we're using the double D rated chart info that we've got at astro.com. I'm not using his chart here because I don't feel comfortable using charts for leaders when we don't have at least an A or above. But at any rate, this moment you can see with this falling right on angles is definitely talking about political pressure, government pressure, homeland discussions, and the sweeping of political philosophies as well. You can kind of see that in the fact that there's this, once the moon finishes this opposition to the sun, she next moves into an opposition with the 9th ruler, Mercury, and Mars is in the 3rd in opposition to the 9th. So you can kind of see that as well. And then I'm going to say it wrong. I keep wanting to say Yelena, maybe it's supposed to be Yelena. I can confirm from Ukraine, the tension was always there since the USSR collapsed. Yes, that sounds like what I've been reading from folks in the region. Okay, so thank you for adding and sharing that. I think also what's useful for us to remember, and this comes in subtle ways in other charts, so I'm not going to bring more focus to it than acknowledging it now and maybe once another time. But this moment had 20 degrees of the cardinal signs, is somewhere between 20 to 27. This also seems to be kicking up a lot of international pressures right now, but it's Pluto. I mean, their part of it is Pluto, but there are also other reasons, like why is it this country and this one and not the other? So Karen said, does it matter that the last aspect the moon made was quite a while ago, so she's moving through the void? I think that if I wanted to get really clever, so what year is it now? So it's 2022, so it's been 32 years since that promise was made. I bet you if I wanted to get really clever, we can find mirrors between how many degrees the last aspect of the moon was and how long it's been since the conversation kind of hit a little bit of a pause. But I haven't looked at that. Do we have a chart for NATO? Yes, we do. It's coming up in just a couple of slides, so hang tight, Mo. All right, so tensions over Ukraine. This is the chart that kind of popped up. Now, what I want to compare and contrast this with is the Capricorn ingress for Ukraine that had just passed. So we're still in the Capricorn ingress. We haven't entered into the Aries ingress of 2022. Remember that the astrological year runs from the end of March to the end of March. So we're still in astrological 2021, if that works for you. Now, what do you notice about Ukraine's chart in comparison with how this all started? This is the Capricorn ingress from December. And then this chart, right? Let me just make sure it's clear for everybody. All right, this is the Capricorn ingress for Ukraine, 21 December 2021, all right, centered on Kiev. And this is the lunation centered over NATO, where everything got kicked off. You see that the moon is in the exact same degree and on angles. We're having 26, 26 repeated, and 27 to 26, 27 to 26. I mean, we're continually seeing this opposition to Moon Pluto and Moon Venus also being involved in both of these as a retrograde planet, which seems quite sharp. Anything else in this chart that's of interest? I'm going to ask somebody to remember for us Mars at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. Is anyone in a place to be able to do that for us? All right, thanks, C. So what I'm connecting with Mars at 5 degrees of Sagittarius is that, any kind of conflicts that appear during this time, while the Capricorn ingress is active and while it's alive, they will carry this kind of Mars at 5 Sag signature. So it's a way of creating a plug-in to the events of these 3 weeks. If we see a chart in the future that features 5 degrees of Sagittarius, we will remember that this Capricorn ingress also had a malefic in that degree. Okay, so that's the kind of work that I'm walking us through here. Are there any questions so far? Is this all making sense? Okay, great. Great. Worth to mention, Saturn return for the USSR collapse. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's part of the conversation too. And just wait, actually, because when we talk about the role of, where Saturn has been and where it will be, it kind of is a very interesting picture. So I just want to say, these are the next 2 lunations centered over NATO. And I just kind of want to talk about the astrology of them. I know the charts are a little bit small, so you might have to zoom in. There's a reason is I'm about to pop up another chart on the other side. So if you remember, and we go back to the Baker chart, remember the Baker chart, how we had all of these planets in Saturn rule sign over the descendant de-escalating tensions? Take a look at what's happening now with this chart, which is set for the lunation on the 1st of February. Okay, it's set for the lunation on the 1st of February. We've got all of these Saturn-ruled planets. Every planet, first of all, is on the Eastern Hemisphere, which is a hemisphere associated with fire and with, emerging power, because a planet is moving from the icy to the midheaven, and in the middle, it becomes visible. So everything associated with the Eastern Hemisphere is about emergence, lifting up, waking up. And so having all these planets on this side of the chart, what this is pointing to is the escalation of tensions rather than the de-escalation we saw in the Baker chart where that discussion was had. If you remember, I've asked somebody to remember 7-8 degrees of Capricorn. Was that C doing that for us? Perfect. So do you see it in this chart? Do you see how the ascendant is built around this degree? Okay, the ascendant for this lunation is built around this degree. Mars is nearly returned to that degree. Venus is just stationed right at 11. Okay. Now, what's interesting about that degree and why I care about it is if we actually take a look at the Ukrainian independence chart, and this is taken from local astrologers. So SJ and I have had conversations about this. Nick Campion quotes a number of different times. He's got like a good 2-paragraph list of like every outlet, what they reported. But the local astrologers at the time that he was doing his compilation swore by this chart and said that this is the one to use. This is the moment that the independence was proclaimed to the people, and there was a rising up in recognition of this. And so this is the chart that I'm using. And I think that I'm also using it because it really smacks in with everything that's going on. Got 8 cap rising. Absolutely, Karen. We're going to see this over and over again. There's this emphasis on 8 degrees, 7 degrees of Capricorn. So whether, this was actually 5:31 p.m. or if it was 5:29, where it would have been 7 degrees, it doesn't matter. It's close enough and we can work with it. Now, take a look at the fact. So I told you earlier that I think that, that we know from local folks that the tensions in Ukraine, they got worse recently, but they've been it's a long-standing kind of issue. It's not anything new. A lot of attention is being brought to this now. This lunation that's coming up on the 1st of February is at 12 degrees of Aquarius. But if you remember, we also had a lunation, in the past year that was right on this axis not too long ago. And Uranus is transiting here right now. So I don't remember the date. I've been meaning to kind of take a look to see that last time that there was the sun moon. I can't remember if it was a new or full moon, but I know it was around 12 degrees. I think it was 12 degrees of Scorpio in opposition to 12 degrees of Uranus. So bang on the angles. It was the new moon in Scorpio. Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. So whatever date the sun is at 12 degrees of Scorpio. So that chart to me plugs in so beautifully with this that I'm positive that, if anyone listening or me at some stage when I've got time, I know there had to have been developments in that period. They're going to be very relevant to timing where this goes. What we can say also about this chart is that, this lunation at 12 degrees of Aquarius, it's moving toward a conjunction with Capricorn. It's exactly in square to the midheaven and to the fourth house cusp of the Ukraine independence chart. And actually, the Ukraine independence angles are being replicated by this lunation over NATO. So what I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt is that this could not possibly be resolved before this date. It wouldn't make any sense for this to de-escalate and completely, disappear. But is everybody seeing how these angles are identical? Boom, boom. One over NATO, one over Kiev. Okay, and these are, some 30 odd years apart. Right, let's see. What else do I want to say? This lunation also sits in square to Uranus, right on the fourth house cusp, which means Ukraine is going through Uranus on the fourth house cusp. As that's a transit that they're experiencing at the moment. And we've got this Baker Promise Mercury retrograde happening here. Remember, the Baker Promise happened at 26 degrees or 27 degrees of Capricorn when Mercury was direct. And now that has become angular. So this, it's like a point of focus now, about what was actually said. And there's a lot of conversation out there about what was said and what was heard, and these are exactly the kind of, details that we would expect as tensions escalate. Now, taking a look at the upcoming lunation, I mean, this one's crazy to me for a number of reasons. First of all, it falls on angles. This is also on NATO, so they're constantly having these like on angles things that are happening over the last couple of weeks, and it will continue. So this is a full moon. It's an exact square to the nodal axis, which means the moon is now at her most northern point. So my guess is probably by the 16th of February, this would have been the most escalated period of public tension because the moon is the one that's elevated and it's on the ascendant. So I'll be watching this, but that seems to be a reasonable interpretation. Is everybody understanding this? Because right, if the moon is passing through the north node, it means she's traveling north. And then when she's exactly in square to that position, that's where she's at the furthest north latitude she can have, and she will begin to move southward after that. So when things move southward, the question is, does tensions de-escalate or do they devolve? It's a little bit, hard to say. And then somebody has also pointed out that there's the fixed star faces on 7-8 degrees of Capricorn, which is true. So the ancients will have associations with blindness, anything with the eyes. I think that symbol makes a lot of sense to me because the lunations here, the moon, sun having rulership over the eyes, the lunations being so tense, the Baker Promise situation happening on an eclipse. It was happening on a lunar eclipse when the left eye is gone. Symbolically, if you really think about it, when the moon signifies the left eye, it is the social repercussions of your actions that get missed. The right eye is a lot easier for Western nations to make sense of. It's much more attuned to this kind of solar principle. With the lunar principle about how people are impacted, a question that's almost never really asked or put on the table. About what the people want, also the same, although ironically, asking what the people want was part of, what kind of led to the final chopping blocks for the USSR. But, at any rate, when you've got the luminaries so poorly afflicted and, stars that are associated with blindness, I think that there is a conversation, a metaphysical conversation, a socio-political conversation to be had about do we have a realistic appreciation for our own foresight? And the degree to which political powers and military powers make negotiations, promising, over-promising, under-promising, over-delivering, under-delivering. I mean, it's all a mess of things. So there is an issue with line of sight, that I think jumps out. But this lunation also falls, right on, I mean, it's not exactly there, but, you're having a Saturn transit to Ukraine's moon. This lunation is very close to the Ukraine's moon, but it also falls, the moon is right on all these 8th house planets, this Venus, this Mercury, and this Jupiter. Okay, now the problem with transits to these planets usually is an indication that the principal outcome is more about protecting the wealth and resources of the individuals, of the belligerents involved, where that nation is involved. So, I don't know how that fits into Ukraine's story just yet. Like I said, I'm just going to have to be honest where I haven't done enough research, but whenever the benefics are hit, what you want to think is that this means, something good, but it also can be pointing to the wealth of that nation, whether that's political, sociological wealth, philosophical wealth, political philosophy, I mean by that. So they're just questions that are worth answering. And, Jupiter, of course, sign of Pisces is entirely intercepted in the second, but it does rule the 12th. So the transits to these planets, Venus ruling the 9th and the 4th, I mean, it's all activating unfortunate houses. The 9th seems like a good house, but it's the 12th from the 10th. So it talks about undermining the act of government. I think that I remember the Ukrainian president saying that Putin really didn't need to be deciding what Ukraine would or would not do as regards NATO. That's for Ukraine to decide. But this 12th house activation that's happening, it's kind of, it gives us reason, astrological understanding of, why a statement like that would come out. I mean, of course, that is the obvious thing, but it's just, that's the language that's also being used as well, as this idea that decisions are being made for somebody else. Yelena has said that Mercury and Venus are both retrograde. The 8th house about shared resources. It's about the Russian language in Ukraine, maybe, this Mercury. I think that's, a beautiful thing to think about. The 8th house, whether it's shared resources or where our loss becomes somebody else's gain, that's a question for somebody else. But I think it's a nervous thing to see so much contact happening in the 8th house. We've also got, I asked somebody to remember Mars at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. So obviously that 5 degrees of Sagittarius is picking up, that'll be in square to the sun of Ukraine. But there is this Jupiter opposition that's happening, Jupiter opposition to the sun, and there's some plug in there. Just to show the picture from Russia's standpoint, what if Canada and South America were satellites of Russia? Do you think that US would feel threatened by this? Yeah, I can't answer that. I think the US is many times quite irrational. So I'm not sure that I can answer that. Right. So, but yes, but I mean, that's kind of, I mean, that is kind of the point. So if, and that's it. Like, I'm trying to be as neutral as I can about this. So I would have to say, like, I think the US didn't keep its word. I think it was a ridiculous thing to say, that was something that would definitively happen into the future with no end date. I mean, that seemed like quite a crazy thing to say. I find it, when you say you're not going to move eastward, and then after 1990 you got 14 different countries, you've only got maybe a couple countries now that are buffer. It's a battle that is, it's a tough one, and I kind of put the onus on this in many respects on the US, and with Secretary Baker and President George Bush, not George W. Bush, George Bush, the first one, the dad. All right, so is anybody else picking up anything that we should address in this chart? Is there anything of interest? I'm hoping, I mean, it might be nice that one argument that might be suggesting that there could be some de-escalation of tensions, it may be temporarily, is this Venus-Mars conjunction. Venus stationed in the preceding lunation right on the ascendant of Ukraine and right on the Ukraine's natal Uranus-Neptune conjunction, and then comes into conjunction with this Mars at, eventually at 16 degrees. But the conjunction actually happens, it becomes exact again on 1 degree, 1 degree of Aquarius. So that's going to be coming up in the beginning of February. Beginning of March. I think it's like March. Oh, I don't even want to guess. I don't know. But that's happening right on the ascendant ruler. So there's that conjunction of Venus and Mars. So whenever that conjunction happens, it's the lunations leading through that period that are going to be of great interest to me. Want to keep moving through. I'm using this chart for NATO, for when NATO went in force on 24th of August, 1991. Yeah, so Yelena has said that, this Jupiter Pisces sextile Capricorn is a peace promise. It's possible. That's what we hope for. I mean, Jupiter is in sextile to Ukraine's ascendant. But, I think that we have more to discuss on this. I think SJ's got some perspectives too about different ways that this conversation can go. It doesn't have to be a very quick form of conventional war. It can be slow and protracted and drawn out, and that can be almost as unsettling. So Mo says, with Venus and Mars chasing each other, where they both have dignity and being stripped out of dignity and having to answer that, Saturn feels loud. like the parties trying to reconcile and calling it off and taking an arbiter of some kind. Yeah, I mean, that is a potential interpretation. And it makes a good deal of sense if you can anchor that Saturn degree into who the arbiter would be. Russia has just now, and yeah, SJ's got that handled. Russia has just now backed down and removed their battleships from Irish waters. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I think we can continue moving forward. I just want to quickly talk about the NATO chart. I mean, NATO's got, so I'm using the chart, this says Kiev, and I have put the wrong time and date here. This is a mistake, a typo. So I apologize. This is neither the time nor date. So I will, in the YouTube video, I will correct the chart data for this. I'm using the time that NATO was signed and put into force. And oh, Layuban says, yeah, they're taking them away from Ireland, but bringing them closer to the USA. So that's fantastic. I mean, this is the other thing that you got to kind of think about with the fact that Jupiter is in Pisces. Everybody's very excited about this, but I think that they forget that just because, you know, the big benefic is in its own sign doesn't mean that it doesn't dramatize and exaggerate all the bad stuff too. It's got to touch it all. So part of the sextile from Jupiter in Pisces may not be about de-escalating tensions, although that's what we hope for. It could be cleverly used to also magnify things and make them much bigger than they need to be. At any rate, so this chart for NATO is set for the US, and it's set for the time when it was signed by Truman and put into effect. And in this chart, here we go. Oh, I wanted to talk about, yeah, this Mars-Jupiter opposition, which is happening across, you know, some pretty important degrees. I mean, you remember I was telling you that there have been around 20 degrees of the cardinal signs, these important points that kind of pop up. I think the last time I was bringing that to your attention was when this whole situation escalated and there was that 20-degree angle there. So let me go ahead and clear everything and come back. So this is of interest to us. This is of interest to us because Uranus, that at 4 degrees of Cancer, that's going to be in opposition to that early degree Capricorn. And yes, Andres also said Jupiter and Pisces is good for oil companies, and that is also, well, if it is theoretically good for oil companies, but it can also mean really, really difficult oil spills that are almost impossible to contain. So, you know, that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is going to be, that'll be one to watch for sure where oil is concerned. But at any rate, let's just keep moving through. You know, we've got this Uranus in opposition to the Ukraine's ascendant and all of those degrees around 7 degrees of Capricorn, which have been hit. That lunation that's coming at 12 degrees of Aquarius, that comes on the 1st of February, is in opposition to NATO's Pluto. And interestingly, if we take a look at the solar return for the current year and next year, take a look at what we've got right on the midheaven here. So this is the current solar return for NATO. We got 7 degrees of Capricorn right on the midheaven. So this, you know, an astrologer working on this should have been able to point out to them that this is absolutely calling in some problem with Ukraine during this period. And with a little work, it probably would have been found. Remember this, Francis, we asked you to remember 20 degrees Pisces. That was the ascendant at the time of the Baker Promise. It is the moon of Germany's reunification on October 3rd, 1990. And it is now also the 4th ruler, or the moon, for NATO solar return for 2021. A lot of nasty stuff in this chart. I mean, the moon is moving from an opposition to Mars to an opposition to Mercury. I mean, I don't know a better signature of somebody broke a promise and now they're going to pay for it. I mean, you know, Moon Mercury opposition shows problems with, you know, promises being broken and you know, issues like that. Breakdown in communication. I don't know if there's anything else that I need to pull out of this chart. We might be able to return to it. I mean, what's interesting is in the next solar return, it doesn't look like things are going to, you know, be that much smoother. The Mars-Jupiter opposition. Well, this could, well, it's a couple of things this could be. Mars-Jupiter, that Mars-Jupiter opposition is one that I associate with the same thing that happens, like the idea of gentrification. So if you think about capitalism as an economic model, it is fed through principles of growth. It doesn't really have measures or controls about when it's too much. It doesn't really have an understanding of where it is cannibalizing itself. whether that's through cannibalizing, the people who have to, actually show up to make the system work. So, causing life to be miserable for people who live under such a system, or cannibalizing the marketplace that it's supposed to derive its wealth from. So it's a pretty big Jupiter signature, to be honest with you. I think when people think about, I've heard somebody say Mars. The issue with Mars is Mars isn't really about growth, it's about cutting growth back. Jupiter, however, if we talk about gentrification, that word gentry, that early bit, Jupiter's always had an association with the gentry. So it's about the growth of systems and streams of wealth. So this Mars-Jupiter opposition, I think, also brings in that same tendency to expand and expand and expand without asking about whether or not it's wise, without having the right checks in place, without having the right kind of questions lined up. This Mars-Jupiter opposition that happens in NATO's chart is actually right across the angles of NATO's solar return for this coming August. So whether or not this means that they're paying for the ramifications of this endless expansion without a cutting, or if they are now realizing we need to really reshift some ways that we hold and negotiate these conversations in future, because this has been a real issue for us. But one way or the other, this theme is going to be, if you're working in NATO or involved with NATO in any kind of professional capacity, then this is going to be a really big kind of connection. I imagine, though, that it's going to be even bigger than that, and it probably will also bring in the rest of the world in some way that's visible. And the reason for that is because in the third goddamn chart now, we have the moon at 27 degrees of Cancer in opposition to Pluto at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So this is the third time now. So this took place. Let me just go ahead and walk us back. Let me see, where's our first chart here? It wasn't here. There we go. So this took place in the Capricorn ingress over Ukraine on an angle. This happened in the week, the lunation, the week that the tensions over Ukraine became public, discussion after Biden's announcement. And now we are looking at this solar return for 2022 that has the exact same signature on angles again. And we have, those 20 degrees of cardinal signs on the angle. So it's quite an interesting thing, to kind of see. I'm wondering how to feel about the fact that natal Venus for NATO is right on the fourth house cusp. I'm tempted not to put too much into that because Venus rules the 12th and it's in the 12th in this chart. So I'm kind of the impression that that may look nicer than it actually is. And of course, it would be in opposition to a retrograde Jupiter on angles. So let me just take a look at what's been said. Talking about breaking promises by everyone towards Ukraine's Budapest Treaty, USA, reaffirm a commitment to Ukraine to respect the independence, which everyone forgot after Crimea. So there's a number of broken promises that are actually kind of coming together. There's the Budapest Treaty in 1994 is what we are hearing in this comment from Yelena. Right. And also, of course, this, the ascendant descendant axis, this is where Saturn is transiting. We're going to have lunations over the summer that are hitting this in a very loud and significant way with oppositions to Saturn. There's going to be some dancing around with Pluto as well, which is going to be a bit tough. We've got the nodes that I believe, now starting to move through Scorpio. So we're only getting closer to eclipses falling right on NATO's ascendant. So that's, not actually too far away. What do you think about Venus in the 2022? I'm just reading a comment here from Mo. What do you think about the Venus being at the bendings of the moon, if I've understood you correctly? I don't think anything, to be honest with you. It's not, there's meaning there. I know that there is, but the nodes are the moons. And so I care about it with respect to the moon. All the other planets have their own nodes. So, I mean, if anything, this position, the Venus standing where, the moon was in respect to how this kind of kicked off of that coming lunation at 27 degrees of Leo, when the moon will be at its most northern point and Venus is kind of standing symbolically in a similar picture. It's a mirror. And I think that's important. I even said something very useful I'd like to share. Everyone's free to make their choices, but they're not free of the consequences. So, it's an interesting kind of thing to think about. What does it mean, if Ukraine decides it does want to leave, enter into NATO? Does that make them one of Russia's primary targets? And then what is the global response after that? I kind of also think it's like, if you remember the Barbeau Index, when everything kind of happened with the pandemic and with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then with the insurrection that happened in the US Capitol, and then there was a number of international conflicts that were happening, actually. I mean, there was just a lot that happened for us in 2020. And if you remember the Barbeau Index, French astrologer André Barbeau had predicted that this would be a period of heightened global conflict and high likelihood of global pandemic. And then the index seemed to suggest that things were going to calm down a little bit. But we also kind of have to remember that if you burned your hand, you don't really have the ability to be near heat again until this is healed. And so we're still very much in the recovery healing period from that first huge crisis. So everything right now is we're about to feel a lot more sensitive about it, and some nervousness as well, I would imagine. I think, just in the interest of making sure we move this over to SJ, I'm going to just finally point out that, because we've been focusing so much on the 7 degrees of Capricorn, being the ascendant for Ukraine, being the current transiting position of Mars, being the ascendant for the lunation over NATO that comes on the 1st of February. And by the way, I'll just bring that chart up one more time, because there's something I did not say about that lunation. Let me find it. This is a strong chart for war. Or indicate with signatures of war. Now, remember what we said in the beginning, we're not here to predict war. I mean, it's not that. The threat of war and the reality of war astrologically are very difficult to tell the difference between. So if we take a look at this, you got that 9 degrees of Capricorn on the ascendant, but we've got Mars exactly conjunct the ascendant. It's the only planet above the horizon. Venus is just stationed, but she's an oriental Venus, an Eastern, a morning star Venus, and this is the Venus that is associated with war. All the planets are ascending, and in the Eastern hemisphere, which is a sign of escalating tensions, which I know I brought up before. So this degree of, Ukraine's ascendant, 8 degrees Capricorn, 9 degrees Capricorn, 7 degrees of Capricorn. When we take a look at the lunations that are coming this summer, there is actually a lunation right in opposition to that. That's 7 degrees of Cancer that's going to happen in late June. So I've got on the left this chart from the perspective of Ukraine, and on the right, I've got it from the perspective of Washington, D.C. I have asked one person to pay attention to 20 Pisces and another to pay attention to 5 Sag. So this period looks doubly reinforced to be an interesting one to watch. Like I said, it's in opposition to that degree at 7 degrees of Capricorn, which brings in NATO, actions in NATO over the next 3 to 4 weeks, and then also Ukraine's birth chart. And then we've also got NATO's Pluto right here on the 7th cusp. We've got this axis has been lit up quite a lot by a number of transits that are happening throughout the year. I mean, Saturn's moving through here right now. The lunation that comes up on February 16th or something like this at 12 degrees of Aquarius. Well, Saturn now will be that ascendant is where Saturn was at that lunation, 15 degrees Aquarius. It's all connecting into this lunation. The reason I'm telling you this is not to just give you a bunch of windows where there are mirrors. It's just to point out that things may die down temporarily and then reactivate, because what's established by the astrology of these moments is like a portal. So basically, having this recurrence of this degree get hit, it invokes the bullshit that happens over a certain period of time, the good and the bad, I mean, everything that kind of moves in that period. This is what we mean when we talk about astrology, kind of being a point of evidence that all things are connected. Right. So, it's an interesting kind of figure to take a look at. I think that there's more that needs to continue to come into focus before I think I could probably say much more without me doing more research. Like I said, I am very much interested in taking a look at what news I can dig up that happened around that new moon in Scorpio at 12 degrees of Scorpio in the back half of 2021. So I think if anybody's interested, that would probably be a useful period to look. And any period where there's a lunation with a degree that we've discussed before on an angle, or the lunation happening in that angle, whether that be over Moscow, whether that be over Kiev, Brussels, or DC. I think what I'm going to do is turn it over to SJ to pick up some more of the conversation. And then after that, we're just going to open it up for discussion and Q&A. You know, but I hope you guys are, you know, finding the information useful and presented in a way that is easy to digest. SJ, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then it's all yours.
All right, Wade, thank you very much. Thanks for that. There's a lot to say here, a lot of interesting stuff you raised that I already want to, I'm going to kind of on the fly, hopefully apply to the talk that I prepared. Let me just start sharing my screen. So I want to just say at the outset, hey, everybody, I've got, so we're about an hour in. I'm going to try to get through this in 30 minutes and have 30 minutes left for questions. I'm kind of nice to have 30 minutes. It's nice to have 30 minutes because I was thinking it would only be 15 and I've got just a ton here. I'm basically going to do a little bit different than Wade. I'm going to be just blazing, and I'm not going to even really be looking at the chat. So Wade, if there's something you want to interject, just interrupt me and we can stop and talk.
You got it, not a problem.
Okay.
Blaze ahead.
But it just is going to be like chaotic, just blazing with a ton of information.
Well, and the good thing, listen, it's recorded, so people can pause. You know, it's not a problem. Yeah.
Perfect. And yeah, so let's just do it. Let's just dive in. First thing I want to say, I think it's useful to think about just the higher level concept of what astrology is, and particularly what mundane astrology is, so we can kind of have a container and a frame, a reality frame for what we're doing here. I think about this as assisting us in the processing of world events, as above, so below, as below, so above. And so we're using these movements to kind of help us engage with how we consciously are approaching the news feeds that we see every day, and these kind of collective energetic upheavals in the world. The astrology will help us kind of like as a therapeutic tool to actually help grapple with maybe really intense headlines. And so that's something that's kind of how I view mundane astrology. It's the understanding is something that it is its own end of just working with these understandings. So this is the stage of why we're talking about this event. This is 25 January 2022. Biden says he's sending troops, right? And there's UK says they're going to have sanctions. Biden's going to send troops. I mean, that's huge. When have we seen US troops being sent to a foreign land, and particularly with Russia? This kind of saber rattling hasn't happened for a very, very, very long time, at least since the 80s, maybe, you know. And so if you count the Balkan wars in the 90s, maybe you're getting US troops here in more of an active role or a threatening role. So that's why we're talking about this. It's a very, very big deal. The next thing I want to say is that anytime I talk about mundane astrology, I like to bring the ISAR ethics rule. The basic idea here is that astrologers, we can't really predict the future. It's not an exact science. You know, there's all kinds of variables. Astrologers get it wrong. We're interpreters of the sky. We sometimes make mistakes. So it's, you know, we're not trying to generate fear here by talking about a difficult topic. And I love,
you've had a couple requests. If you can put it in presentation mode, it's just the view is a little
okay, let me see if I can how I can do that. You guys are ahead of me. You folks are ahead of me with PowerPoint. I usually always
down at the bottom, just to the left of where you can zoom. There's yep, that's the one.
Okay, I always work in this mode because I like seeing those slides on the left, so I can kind of click back and forth, but totally. I'll try this, and hopefully I'll be, I know it's better for you all because you can see what I'm looking at and sharp, and it's larger. So I just, let me just go back to the slide before. Let me see if my keys will work for that. No, does anybody know how I can get back to a previous slide in presentation mode?
If you just click in it, then your keys will work.
Okay, click, and now my keys will work. Okay, cool. So I just want to say this is a disclaimer, and nothing, I don't want to engender fear. Nothing I say hopefully will engender fear. And everything I say should be held in the sense of this is an unknown. We're discovering reality as it unfolds. We're witnesses to it. We are not, none of us here. I mean, maybe there's people on the call that have decision-making authority in these higher level of governments, but I doubt it. So we're kind of using this more as processing. It's not predictive. pray for peace. That's always what I say when I talk about like things like war with major superpowers. Maybe that will help to inject peace. There's already been discussions about Jupiter and Pisces. I think that's part of the optimistic side of this moment we're in. So, okay. This is the other thing I want to say to set the table for all the charts I'm going to dive into. So astrologers as neutral, ideally as astrologers, we try to be neutral, right? We try to look at both sides as much as we can. We try to, not all astrologers do this. I try to do this. I know Wade tries to and did a good job there, but try not to interject our politics in the conversation. But if we do interject our politics, I think it's good for an astrologer to interject the other side and just admit like, okay, this is what I believe, but here's what other people believe, just so an audience can have context. And so I just want to set the stage for this particular moment to contextualize it. On the one hand, there's this idea of Putin as an evil genius dictator that's going to, like, here's the headline from YouTube or Yahoo News that came out today. Putin plans to crush liberty in Ukraine. The free world must unite to stop him. These kind of real epic, kind of symbolic good versus evil sort of tropes that are cast where Putin's the bad guy. So this is on the one hand. And there's all kinds of particularity and nuance in between these two poles. But we have this on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have ideas like, and someone mentioned it in the comments already, Russian encirclement is the basic concept in like academic geopolitical writing. The idea is that you're poking the bear, the West is poking the bear, but in particular, there's kind of a sub-narrative. What I have here, Western war profiteers meddling near Russia's border. And that is these headlines like the Biden administration has a bunch of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin people, hawks that join the Biden administration, and those weapons companies are set to make a bunch of money from this tension. And I just raise these kind of polls. You know, your job as the audience here is to decide, filter through this stuff and make your own decision. What I want to do is focus on astrology, timing, charts, and sort of set these kinds of things aside as best as I can. I will just say one political belief I'll interject here is that I do think Ukraine, you know, it's like self-determination for a national entity. And the Ukrainians I've talked to, it's not as clear one way or the other. There's a lot of kind of complexity even there. And I just support a free and independent peoples with self-determination without meddling from either side as much as that's possible. I know that geography is destiny, and where Ukraine is situated is, it's such a tough zone because you're right, it's right in the middle of some things. Okay, let's keep moving. First thing I want to talk about astrologically is the importance of transit to transit charts in mundane astrology. This is to say, just not looking at any root chart, so not examining, you can apply the transits to root charts, which is what Wade has done such a good job of, but I'm really into transit to transit analysis for predicting world events, and there's two that I want to raise here. One is the idea of Mars and Capricorn timing well-known geopolitical crises in the past. So both the charts of 9/11 and the invasion of Poland, 2001 and 1939 include this Mars and Capricorn. It's not offered as a prediction, but as a processing tool. This is a tweet I had recently, and there was some pushback on this tweet. You see, I have the hashtag pray for peace. I really like to interject that, but someone had some pushback. I like pushback. I want people to push astrologers. And they were like, well, mathematically, Mars has been in Capricorn so many times, so that's a bad prediction. My retort is, what are like the 5 most important military events of the last 100 years? I guarantee you 2 of those are 9/11 and the invasion of Poland. So if we just say 2 of 5 or 2 of 4 or 2 of 3 has Mars and Capricorn, you're getting pretty good odds there. And symbolically it fits because Mars is a planet of war. The astrologers working for those armies, and we know Hitler was using them, might elect for Mars and Capricorn to take action. So and Wade and I were talking earlier about medieval texts talking about strong malefics as being primed for warfare. So there's something about this Mars and Capricorn moment we're in. Right when Mars entered is when this stuff started kicking up. And I think this is part of what's triggering us in the transiting sky. And then the other chart I want to point out is the Cuban Missile Crisis. Happens in 1962 during the same Jupiter and Saturn that we have in this moment. So Jupiter's at 3 degrees of Pisces and 4 degrees of Aquarius during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Same configuration as today. Our Saturn's a little farther out. Our Jupiter's a little bit, it's pretty close to 3 degrees. I think it's 6 degrees right now. But this is the good news of the Jupiter and Pisces, because remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, we brought to the brink and then pulled back. And there's a lot of echoes, right? Borders, missiles near borders. Someone in the comments was just saying, what if Russia had nukes in Canada? Well, that was what the Cuban Missile Crisis was about, nukes on Cuba. And the US says, we're going to bomb you, basically. And so there is a mirror with this Cuban Missile Crisis, and I think this is a reason to be optimistic. Quickly, there's some mundane, some transit timing. Jupiter leaves Pisces May 2022, re-enters Pisces October 2022. Maybe there's a break here, but some kind of return to crisis potentially in October, November, December. Then Jupiter goes back into Aries in December for good. So just know about that. That's kind of my take on the later in the year activations, that I won't talk about those. But the last thing I want to say here quickly with transit to transit charts, Gemini retrograde Mars. I'm not even going to go into that, but that has been crazy for war and geopolitical stuff. You have it in 1943. And when it's fully in Gemini, like it'll be this year, it was in Gemini and in Taurus during the Gulf War I, and then it was fully in Gemini. I think it's late 19th century, but then fully in Gemini during the American Civil War. So that Mars in Gemini retrograde is something that's huge on my radar. I didn't look at it at all for transits for the charts I'm about to go into, but it's part of our 2022 geopolitical crisis moment. We have to be prepared for this Mars in Gemini and the retrograde. It's the 7th house of the Sibley chart. It's kind of intense. And I say that again, pray for peace, pray for peace. Maybe seeing it, we can transmute it, just seeing those potentials, or just sort of kind of face it with courage, whatever that's going to trigger. So let's move. The rest of my talk, this is what I'm going to do. Layer root charts to find relevant, important hot zones of the zodiac, just like Wade was doing. And then I'm going to look for your upcoming transits to see when those root charts get activated by transits. And then we're going to try to tell some stories around maybe some of the symbols. Okay, so that's simply what's happening here for anybody who is new to mundane astrology. We're just layering charts, looking for activated zones and seeing when those get hit. All right, first activated zone here. So the first this slide, we deal with root charts. This is the chart that everything gets grounded in, and Ukraine's nativity is kind of the center of everything. This is where things are happening in Ukraine. It's all about the nation of Ukraine, the borders of Ukraine, the status of Ukraine. So this is the key root chart. All my slides will have this in the first position. And I want to just point out here, Capricorn rising 9 degrees. So already we've seen, and I'm not going to reference, but 9 degrees mutables, 8, 9. So actually it's 8 degrees. Sorry, this slide is wrong. It's 8 degrees. It's the 9th degree of Capricorn, or 8 degrees, where Mars, Uranus squares have already appeared earlier in Wade's talk. You have Saturn in the 1st degree in Aquarius, the moon in the 22nd degree in Aquarius. There's a co-presence in Aquarius with Saturn and the moon. And then there's that Leo stellium that Wade has already talked about so much. So fixed signs are heavy, heavy duty here. You've got this Venus, Pluto square. It's a little, the orb is far, but it's still, about 11 degrees. The midheaven is in Scorpio. And this is a big theme that's going to reappear. What I'm going to do as I go through charts, I'm going to try to just extract some themes that we can look at later that are going to become important. One big theme of all of this astrology is Venus, Pluto, and hard aspect. And what could that mean symbolically? Well, Venus is a war planet. I've been tweeting about this last month a little bit as I was studying some of the Babylonian symbolism. Venus has this whole rich history as a warrior and a kind of war god. I think it has to do with Mars and Venus being so linked in the zodiac in terms of the axis of the signs they rule being opposite each other. Venus and Mars are actually quite alike. Both symbolize sex, both symbolize war. You think about Venus, like I think about just Homer or the Trojan War, and how much of that was about love, and how we'll die for love. People like, this is the hill I'll die on, come up from my cold dead hands, this kind of mentality. It's really what we love that can drive that. And Pluto as a fundamental driving force of reality. I've seen these plutonic, so this plutonic war kind of thing is core. And the reason why I think it's so important in this situation is that it's core to the collective reality. I mean, everywhere in the world, they're going to be talking about the United States and Russia going at it. It's embedded in our symbol set and the representations that we've just lived through in the last century. So our parents and our grandparents all lived through these kind of same embedded representations. That's Pluto. And as this Venus-Pluto gets triggered in so many charts, it's just something you can consider. But a major theme is also fixed axis is key. So much of the activations happening now in the fixed axis. In the Ukraine chart, 5 of the 7 traditional planets are in the fixed axis, Pluto and the midheaven in the fixed axis as well. There's multiple types of root charts. There's national formation charts, which is what we were just looking at. This is the Ukrainian independence chart. that the astrologers told us they use in Nick Campion's book, as Wade mentioned, but there's also ingress charts as root charts. And so one of my favorite mundane root charts to use is the Aries ingress that happens prior to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. You use that as a root chart. This comes from, I think, Mashallah, the great, late, I guess, medieval, you would call that, astrologer. So I've been looking at this chart. Ben Dykes taught me this technique. He would use these same charts as root charts, but you have the 2020 Aries ingress as a root chart for the next 20 years. We're going to be living under the influence of this chart. And this is that crazy chart from March 2020. I mean, if you just look at traditionals, it was the South Node, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn all together, throwing in Pluto there. That's massive, epic Capricorn pileup. The last time that happened with those traditionals there and the South Node was right when the Roman Empire fell a long, long time ago. So it's this dramatic upheaval along this kind of core axis of the Thema Mundi, Capricorn, Cancer. But look at the other thing about this chart. You've got the Capricorn pile up. So we already have late degrees if Capricorn is highly significant. Pluto and Saturn were both in those late degrees. That's going to be a theme. Late degrees of Cardinals, late degrees of Capricorn. But this Aquarius moon, now we have another Aquarius moon. Remember, Ukraine's chart has the Aquarius moon. This root chart has the Aquarius moon, 13 degrees Aquarius. And then the nodes are also early Capricorn, Cancer near Ukraine's ascendant, that 4 degrees of the South Node, and Capricorn near 8 degrees Capricorn of Ukraine's ascendant. So let's just keep going. So all of these degrees are just hot degrees for, like I said, the next 20 years. And we're living in the wake of that. It's being triggered now with so many planets in Capricorn, Aquarius, and the current transiting sky. We're going to look at all those charts later. But so now let's just keep layering charts. Here's Ukraine's chart at the inner wheel. The Aries ingress is on the outside. Let's just look at a bi-wheel with these two charts. And I've already talked about some of this. I think the only thing that's different is, well, you have to understand the Capricorn pileup in that ingress of 2020 is in Ukraine's first chart of the people, of the kind of sense of the nation. It tells us that this next 20 years, Ukraine has a really important role to play. And its kind of identity as a nation is in play. And so I think this could be lingering on for a long time. It could be a new Cold War type situation. What if you get East Ukraine, West Ukraine, and all of that could just be a constant kind of theater for 20 years, potentially. The Aries ingress Jupiter Mars is at 22 degrees, that conjunction, and that's near the north node of Ukraine's natal chart. So again, the major theme is like Capricorn, cardinal signs, late degrees, and then early degrees, cardinal signs as a theme here. Let me see what else I've got on this slide. So the 2020 Aries ingress Venus and Taurus. Now we're seeing this theme repeat. Venus and Taurus in fixed signs, middle degrees of fixed signs, opposes the midheaven and the Pluto of Ukraine's nativity. And so you're starting to see the Venus-Pluto theme emerge here in these two root charts, and that's a major theme, Venus, Pluto, and hard aspects, middle degrees of fixed signs. Okay, next chart I want to look at and compare. Ukraine on the inner wheel, Russia declaration chart on the outer wheel. Again, this is where it gets like, this is when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Because in the Russia chart, you have an Aquarius moon. So that's 3 Aquarius moons now. The Russia day chart from 18 June 1990, Ukraine's chart, and then the Aquarius Aries ingress 2020 chart has the Aquarius moon. But look where the Russia, let's see. So the moon is the masses of people. That's why I think this moment where now Saturn has entered Aquarius, Pluto's going to enter Aquarius in 2023. We're hitting the moon in that Aries ingress and in these charts, and it's the masses of people. This is why I think it's this kind of collective conscious that Russia versus the West, that is really embedded in our collective mentality. Boy, this slide thing, it like keeps moving the slides. I don't like it, but I know you guys see it better. You all see it better, so I'm going to keep doing it. So events here affect the world population, just using the idea of the moon as the masses. Okay, let me go to the next slide here. Russia's Venus and Taurus is opposite the Pluto. So you see that right near the Ukraine MC and Pluto. And so I already talked about that. You see the Venus-Pluto hard aspect reappearing in the Russia chart layered with the Ukraine chart. Okay, Russia's fixed nodes in the Aquarius Leo axis You have those in 8 degrees. And so you're kind of getting again into these early degrees of Aquarius near where Saturn is now. That lunate, the syzygy, I call new moons and full moon syzygies, but that upcoming new moon that's just going to happen soon is right near the moon of Russia and near the north node of Russia. And so it's hitting these kind of faded themes. I use nodes a little bit differently than Wade. I do think that because eclipses are so fundamental that, you know, when you have things hitting the lunar nodes, it can kind of tap into our reality similarly to when a planet is near those nodes during an eclipse. We would really want to use that. But I understand where Wade's coming from too. I think it's, you know, there's a lot of different approaches in astrology. As you notice, I use
with conjunctions, just not aspects to them. That's all.
Okay, cool. I would just say that the bendings, like the north bending, maybe if there's one aspect, it's the hard aspect that we might also include. And that's kind of a newer technique. A lot of people have pioneered the north bending, but let's come back here. Russia, Saturn, and Capricorn on the 24th. So that's the Russia, Saturn, and Capricorn. What about the 2020 Aries ingress? Remember what was at the 24th degree? Pluto. And then the Saturn was at 29 degrees Capricorn. It also, I think, explains why this period of 2020, you're going to see Russia, the kind of Russia, what happens with Russia is very important in the next 20 years because of that 2020 ingress and Russia's nativity having the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in that biwheel, in that comparison. What else do we have here? That's what I just mentioned. Okay, let's keep going here. This is the other thing about the Russia chart, the Russia Day 1990 chart. Mars-Uranus square. And you have Uranus on the ascendant of Ukraine, the Russia-Uranus on the ascendant of Ukraine, and Mars in Aries in the Russia Day chart squaring the ascendant. Does anybody know how to stop it from automatically moving forward? If you could help me, because that's going to be tough here. I don't want to kind of keep going back and forth. If it's not bothering you, that's fine. I'll just keep going here, but you see here that the 8 degrees Mars in Aries squares the ascendant of Ukraine. So Russia's Mars squares Ukraine's ascendant, and Russia's Uranus is on Ukraine's ascendant. So we're dealing with very, very heavy energies, explosive surprises. I mean, we could wake up and this could all happen like that. That's the kind of way I would delineate this, maybe as this stuff gets activated. So I have here direct hit. Let's just keep going. There's 3 charts we've looked at so far: Ukraine's chart, Russia's Russia Day chart, and then the Aries ingress 2020 chart. And we've sort of seen those themes that have emerged. I want to look at 2 other quick charts, and this is the Aries and Capricorn ingresses of 2021. So Wade looked at the the Capricorn ingress 2021. I'm going to look at that a little bit too, but also bring in the Aries ingress, the idea that the Aries ingress maybe sets the tone for the whole year, and then the Capricorn gives an added and a deeper kind of analysis for the 3 months we're currently in. Just notice here, here's a tri-wheel comparing those ingresses. Mutable Marses in all of those. So you have a sign-based mutable hard aspect Mars between the Ukraine Mars, which is at 25 degrees Virgo, the 5 degrees Sagittarius Mars in the Capricorn ingress, and then the 9 degrees Gemini Mars in the Aries ingress for 2021. That just tells me that the year already for Ukraine, because the Aries ingress Mars is in mutable signs as well as Ukraine's natal Mars, then it gets triggered even more. So excuse me, y'all, I just apologize for this. I'm not used to working here like with this particular setup. So pardon me for going back and forth between these slides. I'm just going to settle back into the slide I was in. You can see it here. This mutable Mars in the Capricorn ingress opposes the Mars in the Aries ingress. Just here. So that's what I'm looking at. And then the December 2021 ingress has Venus at 26 degrees Pluto, 26 degrees Capricorn, pardon me. Pluto is at 25 degrees Capricorn in Ukraine's first house in these late degrees that we've been talking about of Capricorn that are part of the the Aries ingress in 2020. So I hope that's part of the story. The other thing, I hope you're following me. I'm kind of moving fast here. Look at where Saturn is in the December ingress, and look where it is in line with that Saturn in Ukraine's nativity. Someone was mentioning in the comments, that's a huge part about this whole period, is that Ukraine is having its Saturn return. And so without even needing to know anything else about degrees, we know that this whole period is a process of maturity for Ukraine as a nation. I think when the Saturn returns over, we'll have maybe something solidified. This ends in March 2023 by sign. And the reason why the Saturn return is so important for the identity of the nation is that Saturn rules the ascendant in the Ukraine chart. And so there's this Saturn return, then we would delineate it as incorporating ideas about identity and selfhood for the nation. And so this is another reason why it's such a hot period. If you think about it, and I've been wanting to say this, if you go back to 1990 and you're astrologers and you've got these charts and it's all this, it's Capricorn, Saturn and Capricorn in Russia's chart, it's Saturn and Aquarius in Ukraine's chart, and you're going to predict when might this get hot again. You would think about Pluto entering Capricorn and Aquarius. Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008. You would think about the Saturn return of those whole events. So we're living through that now. Just those predictive techniques alone explain why this is hot and now on the front burner again. Okay, let me keep moving here. Wade mentioned this, Cancer rising in the Cancer rising with the moon in Cancer in the Capricorn ingress. Again, those late cardinals. And it's opposite the Pluto-Venus conjunction in Capricorn that you see there in the in that same chart. You see it in the line there. Let me just keep moving. So I'm looking at these two ingress charts, these recent ingress charts. I kind of thought about deleting these slides, but I think it's worth considering the late degree cardinals and particularly the December ingress chart and how much those late degrees are of the moon and of the ascendant in Kiev are directly opposite all of the late cardinal stuff that's so important from Ukraine's nativity and the 2020 area ingress root chart. That's the major point here for the Capricorn ingress. So so that's done with the root chart analysis. Now I want to shift so that we have the major themes. I won't repeat them, but I've raised them already. They'll come up in these slides. I want to look at transits. What transits coming up in the immediate future may trigger these major themes in the root chart comparison? All right, and the first chart I want to look at, new moon in Aquarius at 12 degrees of Aquarius. This is coming up in days, 1st of February 2021. And you can see here that the moon in all of these charts is getting hit. So this is a quintuple wheel, I think is what Solar Fire calls it. But every chart here has an Aquarius moon except the, I think that's the Aries ingress 2021. That's the only one that doesn't have an Aquarius moon, but that has the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. But look at that. Like Ukraine's natal Aquarius moon, Russia natal Aquarius moon, Aries ingress 2020 Aquarius moon, and then we have the new moon in Aquarius hitting it. The other thing about this chart is that in Kiev, that new moon in Aquarius is rising. So you have 14 degrees of Aquarius rising in Kiev and the new moon at 12 degrees. Tells us anytime you're hitting an angle that it's activating that transit for that location in a more pronounced way. Let me see here. So it hits all the themes I've just listed in here. The Aquarius moon theme, the Ukraine Saturn return theme, a new moon syzygy in the sign that the Saturn return's happening. 1 degree or 11 degrees away from the natal Saturn and 3 degrees away from transiting Saturn. So you're getting the Ukraine Saturn return theme with this syzygy, with this new moon. Then you have here the middle degrees of fixed sign theme is activated because where is that? I mean, it's obviously Uranus being active in Taurus as a part of this moment. But the syzygy itself, the new moon is in the middle degrees of fixed signs. And so you have that angularity to the Pluto midheaven conjunction in Ukraine's chart, the Russia Venus at 15 degrees, the 2020 Aries ingress at also 15 degrees of Taurus. It's in that direct hit line with this syzygy, only 3 degrees away from that. So that's being hit as a theme. Let me see here. What else do I have here? Early degree cardinal theme with Mars at 5 degrees Capricorn. That hits the Russia 8 degrees Mars, cardinal Mars, 8 degrees Aries, and the Russia Uranus at 8 degrees Capricorn and the Ukraine ascendant in 8 degrees Capricorn. So Mars is basically hitting the Ukraine ascendant as you get into this new moon here in this current moment we're in. These new moons lock in energy for the next lunation. I use the term lunation for a lunar month. But so let's come back here. And then the Capricorn pileup, obviously, we have a transiting stellium, Pluto, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and when we have so much Capricorn in all of these root charts that we've examined, particularly the 2020 Aries ingress and then Ukraine natal. So, okay, that's the first transit I want to look at. And I would just say it's an active hot zone is really all is how I'll delineate this. I don't know if there's going to be war or invasion or not. Some of the other slides will maybe speak to like a prediction around that. I just know this whole transaction of facts is highly activated and it's going to stay activated. And you don't need astrology to tell you that. Just open up the paper, right? Type in Ukraine in any search engine, put news, and it's just story after story describing it. So, okay, let me come back to this next chart. This is the next transit I want to look at. And this is the, oh, sorry, this is the same new moon. I think I covered everything already here. Yes, I did cover everything. And so there you go. When you write these slides, you end up talking about them without even having to be looking at them. So this is the next transit I want to look at. Sun, Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. That's happening on 4 February. So 3 days after that new moon, the sun purifies Saturn in the heart of the sun, Cazimi, some people call this, and it can be quite auspicious for Saturn themes. I think that this fact of the sun purifying Saturn in the 15th degree of Aquarius, angular to the Pluto in Russia's chart by partile angularity, angular to the midheaven Pluto conjunction in Ukraine's chart by 2 degrees on either side, angular to the Venus in Russia's chart, angular to the Venus in the Aries ingress chart 2020. This to me feels quite important as what may emerge for maybe some kind of structure around the situation, where maybe we get someone stepping in and setting some groundwork or structure for resolution. Let me see here. I want to just say, here's what I found. This guy, this wacky looking guy that we all know, named Bojo, Bojo, Boris Johnson. So he's coming up here and meeting Putin very soon. And he's visiting the region right around this time, maybe. And I'm wondering if this is that mediator that we were speaking of earlier, the UK now getting involved to try to mediate. Is Bojo to the rescue? Maybe it will fuel deal making. Remember, Saturn Aquarius is powerful, it's dignified. Venus in Taurus, the Aries ingress at that 15 degrees, that's a dignified Venus. This tells me there might be some brokering or deal making. Wade, are you wanting to come in here?
Yeah, I just unmuted myself to say that I'll just turn my video on quickly just to say that every 2 weeks, Wendy Stacy hosts a current climate kind of discussion, which is open to the public. So if there are interested folks here, let me know. I'll leave a link. I sometimes go to those. I find them very fun. We take a look at the next couple of new moons, full moons. I also didn't realize maybe I have been using lunation technically incorrectly. I had no idea. But at any rate, one of the things that we discussed is she had opened up the full moon in the UK, centered on London. And I had been distracted talking about wanting to, like, this whole Ukraine-Russian thing. And so, but when we came back to that chart, suddenly a lot of the degrees were reactivated on the UK's chart. And we said in that it was very likely that the UK would step in kind of as a third party, but I don't think we got that specific, but there's somebody, a mixture of people basically said that there's a role for the UK to play. So it lines up in their recent syzygy.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I know the vocab's a little, we kind of all have different vocab, but thank you, Wade, for saying that, because it's, we like as astrologers confirmation when it's like different astrologers saying the same thing, maybe using different techniques. But check out this next slide. This is where it gets even more interesting, because look at Bojo's nativity. It's A-rated, so we meet Wade's standard. He's got Jupiter on the Venus of Russia, 15 degrees partile, Jupiter on the Venus of the 2020s Aries ingress, Jupiter again hitting that angularity to Ukraine's Pluto and midheaven and Russia's Pluto. So there's something here about Boris Johnson. And I mean, I'm not that into the guy, but I mean, it's kind of the astrology is just speaking quite loud about Boris Johnson. Now, the thing about it, it's also interesting, is his Neptune is exactly opposite that that Jupiter, 15 degrees Scorpio. So Bojo's Neptune is right on Pluto, Russia, Pluto, Ukraine, Pluto, and Ukraine midheaven. And maybe that Neptune is confusion reigns, or, Boris Johnson is known for kind of he's a strange guy. I mean, and maybe he's not going to come to save the day, but maybe add confusion. I'm not sure, but.
And SJ, the Boris's IC at 12 Capricorn is right in line with that hot point of degrees that have to do with Ukraine, that have to do with this crisis, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 degrees of Capricorn. So, wow, that's a good catch.
Yeah. This is something that just as you do research, I was telling Wade, these rabbit holes will appear. You just start pulling threads, and it led me to this chart. I saw this earlier today, and I was like, God, I gotta conclude this. So almost done here. One more transit and a couple more final thoughts. I'm going to move here, hopefully get done really, really soon. But the next one I want to look at, this is the final transit as trigger. I kind of kept it in a more compressed zone because I think when Jupiter moves out of Pisces, maybe this is going to somehow take the pressure off because of that for temporarily, is my sense. But look at here, the March 3rd, 2020, Venus and Pluto and Capricorn meet. The reason why I'm so focused on it is that Venus-Pluto angularity we've seen in a lot of the synastry and the biwheels and triwheels. It's happening in Ukraine's first house. Mars is right mixed in there with it. And so I'm wondering if this could, to me, feels like timing some kind of crisis, actually, honestly. I mean, maybe the Bojo stuff fails and now we're back in crisis mode. It's right near all of that late cardinal pileup that has been so important in everything we've seen. So and it's on Russia's Saturn. It's on the Aries Ingress 2020 Saturn. It's just all right in that line. So let me just keep going here. The moon is in Pisces, 26 degrees. I don't think that's the exact degree you were looking at, Wade. What was it, 20 degrees Pisces? Was that what?
Yes, 20 Pisces.
Yeah. So look where the Virgo Mars in Ukraine's chart is at 25 degrees. This moon will be at 26 degrees the moment that Venus and Pluto conjoin. And so it's activating that Ukraine Mars, the ascendant in the moment of, okay, so actually, no, that's not. So transiting Mars, so I've said that. Now there's two final pieces I want to close with. These are really fascinating. China is the final piece. China is a big player right now with all of this. And it's the same themes. Look at China's nativity. This is the one we use, or I've used. I think it's really good. It's the Mao Declaration chart. It's the triwheel, the outer wheel. Look where Venus, 19 degrees Scorpio. So it's hitting that mid-degree Venus-Pluto theme we've been addressing. But look where their Pluto is. China's 17 Leo. 17 Leo near, was that the NATO Pluto was right in the middle degrees of Leo. And they've got Mars in Leo. So this fixed angularity that I've been raising as a theme. And then the other thing, they've got an Aquarius moon too, China. So you throw the Chinese Aquarius moon. And so Saturn is Sati Sati for all of these charts, with the sun transiting Saturn on the moon of Ukraine, Russia, China. Isn't that kind of trippy? And look at the news that's come out. China is watching Ukraine with a lot of interests. Okay, because they're dealing with the Taiwan, and maybe if there's something happens in Ukraine, China makes a move in Taiwan. You saw this story: Chinese military jets fly near Taiwan as U.S. distracted by Ukraine. This was right when all this emerged in the last week. This is the other big deal. Putin and Xi are cementing a partnership in December in the face of Western pressure. They said they're going to stand firm and they're going to reject Western interference and defend each other's security interests. Two Aquarius moon countries. And the moons, if we just go back to that chart, look where Russia's moon is 5, China's moon is 3. That really does kind of fuse them, doesn't it? In terms of the people and the kind of sense of the lunar safety that we think about and all of that stuff. And I want to just point this out. So the Olympics, now we're getting towards the end here. The Olympics start February 4th through 20. You probably haven't heard much about it in the Western media because there's a boycott. But this is when they're going to have a summit. Xi and Putin are going to hold a summit during these Olympics and continue talking here. So I'm looking for these Olympics as a hot zone. It happens in this lunation triggered by the new moon in Aquarius. And then even if we say the first half of that lunar month, those first 14 days most of these Olympics will be during that. Of course, you get But this is, remember back in the last time the Olympics were in China, 2008, what happened during those Olympics? This big thing with Russia and Georgia, it was kind of the reemergence of Russia as like the invader and bad guy in the West, because there was Uzbekia and Abkhazia, I think that's how you say it, these Russian speaking regions in Georgia. There was that's a whole thing that I don't even want to go into, like who's at fault or anything, but it's exactly the same thing that's happening if you think about Donbass and I'm butchering these names. I'm sure the people that are watching can help us, but the two regions in far eastern Ukraine that they've already declared independence. And there's kind of, so it's like a very similar theme, but we're dealing with the Olympics as a repetition here. But look at the chart for those Summer Olympics in 1st August 2008. You had a new moon in Leo on the first day of those Olympics at 9 degrees. Directly opposite the full moon that we're about to have at 12 degrees. And I think there's something here with this Olympics that could have some kind of trigger for all of this. So maybe so anyhow, I'm going to just end it there, Wade.
I just wanted to say that that's right on NATO's midheaven also, because NATO's midheaven is 8 Leo.
Perfect. So it's, and that's, if you all remember, it was a huge deal. It's like I woke up and it's like Russia invades Georgia was the big headline. And then you peeled it back and it was like, well, maybe the Georgian president tried to send troops first and Russia, it's a whole complicated mess. I don't know how to resolve that, but it was a huge deal. Russia, China, again, China having world stage with Olympics, Russia there kind of using it as a cover to maybe do things, or Georgia using it as a cover to create, or NATO, who knows. But so anyhow, I'm going to end it there. Let's go to questions. I don't know if there were questions or how we should do this way.
So a lot of the stuff that deferred to you was just kind of backfilling some of the commentary. Like it's good. So when this closes down, I think it would be good to review the chat. But I don't think I saw any questions come through.
Okay.
Here.
Cool. Well, I'm going to mute and just kind of turn it over to you for however you want to.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of open discussion at this point. I don't know if anybody's got any kind of comments. We can also close down. I don't know what kind of questions would make sense for.
I think I'm going to allow participants to unmute themselves, and I'm going to change that setting, and just now anybody can unmute themselves. How about that? And maybe we go for another 15 minutes if people want to say anything. Does that sound good, Wade? It'll be a full 2 hours.
Yeah, that's fine by me. Just
anybody
comment. Apparently both Russia and China have been creating new international money movement applications so that they won't be affected by sanctions on the SWIFT banking system.
Yeah,
that's interesting. You know what I've been kind of thinking about recently was like, if you watch a lot of the aspects that Jupiter has been involved in over the last it's like they're all so big that Jupiter's the least of them. Like you got bigger players in all of it. You got Saturn, you got Uranus, you've got Neptune or Pluto, all in these kind of really big things that have happened. Like with this, everybody talked about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Jupiter was there too. Like so was Mars, like there's just like this whole, so I kind of have been thinking about how funny it is that even us as astrologers, we show how easy it is for big things to command our attention, and a whole planet can sweep through and go effectively unnoticed if it wants to. And that always is Jupiter and Mars who sweep through the bigger cycles and then tend to get ignored. So to me, I kind of have, been wondering about what that might have to say, if anything, about how money interests slide under these situations and in unseen ways. So I was very interested to read this comment, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. I feel so naive to not have even considered that. But there was also, what was the discussion about?
I just quick, the comment about the Crimea annexation happening during Olympics in 2014, Yelenia, that was during the Sochi Olympics. So there's something about the Olympics here. I mean, and that's really interesting to me to see that that's part of our recent history. I do think there's also, Mo was talking about the EU as involved in all this. That's a big part of the story. Germany maybe not selling, and now they are selling the weapons. But it brings up the EU versus the UK, and that break that happened with Brexit is how do they respond to Boris maybe trying to do something? Are they going to support? Are they going to, especially being closer to the region and the pipelines that run through Ukraine into Europe with the gas flow into Europe? That's a whole big part of it. So I think that's a really interesting point.
Did you see that? It's also just said that it was previously Venus retrograde in Capricorn at the Crimea annexation as well.
Oh yeah, that was the 2014, the last Venus RX in Capricorn. Wow, so that's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, Krista says the Olympics are sort of the countries playing war, maybe symbolically. And
well, so that's what I was kind of talking about, was that like Jupiter, so money interests move, and then also military and like forced interests move, and they can move in a lot of interesting ways. And I think that it's probably likely, if you look at the astrology of those events, if something secret was being held at the Olympics, it's going to show through. That the signature has to show up that some kind of supposedly cooperative event is actually hosting something else.
Yeah, Christy has a comment. 1917 revolution chart has Saturn 14 Leo opposing Uranus 19 Scorpio. Yeah. So that's fascinating too. Yeah, I think these fixed signs, even if we just think about the symbolism of fixed signs as kind of things that are locked in, and what happens when you have deep activation in fixed signs, it's almost these tectonic kind of shifts that are happening. And I think that's a big part of Saturn and Aquarius generally as a delineation, but in these charts in particular, hitting all of those middle degrees now. Maybe what's going to happen that we'll have some reformulations geopolitically that will create structure. Someone was mentioning like the Yalta meeting with Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill. Maybe there's something like that could emerge here and kind of restructure things. That's what Saturn does for another 30 years or another. I'm just trying to think of, one other thing I wanted to quickly say, Wade, is the Barbeau. I could have done a whole thing on Barbeau. I didn't put this in at all, but that index bottoms in March. So we're still descending in the Barbeau index. It bottoms exactly on March 25th, and then it begins rising. And Barbeau in his writings says 2025 is when the crisis ends. And that's when it begins to end, is only 2025, and then 2026, and then the rest of the decade we rise into this kind of new world or new global civilization. But he seems to imply that the crisis, we're like deep in it now. And I think that could be part of this year as well, is that maybe it's not so much Corona stuff, but we shift now into this geopolitical side of it.
I'll tell you the only criticism I have of this, and I don't know how to model it, but the thing is, the way that this works is it makes the assumption that when you go down into the dip, right, that just because the pressures have released doesn't, like, your strength to withstand it. So these things are measuring positions. They're not measuring like war weariness. We've come through a pandemic, we come through those other things. So something that's like this small, it doesn't have to be a big climactic addition on that to break everything because it's so sensitive. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think the hard thing is taking a predictive stance that we enter into a new global age because there's nothing. It's like you get hit by a car, and as far as your body is concerned, it's only going up from there, but the experience is still shit. So like I'm still
sounds kind of pessimistic there, Wade.
What was that?
I said it sounds a little pessimistic there. I'm just joshing with you there, but I mean,
it does sound
just to point.
I don't want to believe that, but I mean that's the only thing that I think about with these kind of indexes is they measure the astrological moment, but they don't measure the wave that comes after. So
yeah, I like that. I mean, I think the quality of time, those indexes, you really have to go into a whole other analysis to really get a sense of the quality, and I think like the Saturn heaviness that's so dominant for right now is a part of, maybe I feel that in what you're saying for sure. One thing just to point out, all outer planets will be changing signs by 2026, everything. And a part of Barbeau's analysis is this chart, this moment in July 2026, I believe it is, where it's these perfect sextiles and trines between Saturn, Neptune. Saturn and Neptune are in Aries, but it's Pluto and Neptune, Uranus and Jupiter are all making these beautiful trines in the early degrees of the dissect or so-called masculine signs. And that is symbolically the elegance of that geometry. I think that we're setting aside Barbeau. I think that is something that we can kind of lean into as supportive outer planet transits by 2026. You know,
yeah, the astrology does get a lot less. It just feels compressed in the front half, with humors that are not like cooperative with each other. So that's the yeah. So I agree. Having a little bit more uniformity. That sounds. But I haven't read that part from Barbeau, so I feel like I need to. I saw that it had been recently translated. I only ever saw the one paragraph that circulated. Do you remember that one paragraph that got circulated on Twitter for however long? And Lynn Bell and I had spoken about Andre Barbeau. I believe they were close friends, and but I've never actually read it myself. So
yeah, I did a translation. So on the website, you can get these essays. You can translate them in Google Translate, and there was some French people that were helping with that and just getting some loose translations. But
awesome.
you know, it's exciting, I think, and I think we're in a moment of hang on and hold on, especially in 2022. It's more hang on and hold on. Let's just get through this, get into 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026. And I feel like there'll be a lot of collective rebirth, and, you know, we're going to come out of this crisis and we'll look back. Wow. You know, you see, what's the Leonard Cohen line about the end of World War II? It's like, I haven't partied this hard since the end of World War II. Like, there could be some moments like that, I think, as we kind of realize, oh, this might be over. And it's like, we're doing this in Cancun and everybody can come in and we're just having a blast and a ball. So I'm kind of holding out for that. And I think it's good psychologically.
Oh my God, that sounds
yeah, I know.
That sounds great. Well, listen, we haven't had any more questions come in, so I think we can probably go ahead and shut it down. Thanks for the folks who joined, but SJ, thanks for joining me. I mean, it was just a fun conversation. Fun in the sense of like, it feels nice to be woken up. I mean, that's part of what's exciting about the way information is being, like, how many people who are here in this room who would say that 2 years ago they would not have taken an interest in a topic like this. I mean, I think that what's happened with global affairs, it's caused us to be much more concerned with local experience, with our neighbors, our friends. And yeah, I'm getting a ton of people private messaging me. I wouldn't have. Yeah, so I guess you guys don't want to admit it out loud. That's so funny. Well, I'll admit it. I would have had an interest, but I just wouldn't have done it. That's what would have happened. So I don't know. There's a really cool way that we can all come out of this. I think what's nice is to have a tool that can help us stay alert, and also to help us understand ways that we can kind of, you know, adjust ourselves to understanding, you know, the frameworks that are being shaken out around us. So it's a helpful thing on its own. Thanks, guys, for, you know, joining, and we'll close down.
Okay, thank you, Wade. Take care. Thank you, everybody.
And thanks, SJ. I think I thanked you, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you.